Welcome to yet another interesting. Welcome to Court Activism Africa. Today we are discussing
ceremonies. Good evening, Kato. How are you? Good to see you. Can you hear me? Is my sound good?
Welcome again and get situated.
I've lost sound. I didn't hear you there.
I can hear you very well, Lynda. You are welcome on board.
Wonderful to see you again, Kato. It's the week's
and the prospects of humanist ceremonies in Africa.
Sorry? Yes, we've had a lot of interest in this show this week. I see on the page we had a lot of interest in it. People are really keen to hear about this, and I think it's wonderful that it's a topic we haven't discussed. And I was just saying the weeks fly past so quickly. I think we've been doing this for almost a year now.
Yes. It's a topic we haven't discussed yet. We have celebrants in Africa that can do these secular ceremonies. We talk about ceremonies without God. We are trained celebrants, and we have been doing this for quite some time. So today we are going to be able to listen to the people trained to do that work and see and hear what they have done. Lynda, I know you have done a little bit of work on researching on this subject. I want to invite you to give us an introduction into what we are going to be talking about today.
Yes, well, the whole thing starts, I guess, with officiating the main ceremonies that we go through in life, which are all to do with family unity and having children and increasing your family size, and which in African culture and traditions was always done in a ceremonial way without any god or certificates or officiating. And the marriage and the family unit was just as strong and valid. It was just as valid as it was how the church tried to enforce it. Well, the thing is, I think with Christianity in Africa, automatically baptisms, funerals with death certificates, christenings, and also the marriage, the whole marriage thing, the saying, the sacredness of marriage and no premarital sex, no affairs, no divorces, that kind of thing. These were all enforced on us through the church, but they were not the true African way of doing things. And what some of my Black friends are always amazed to hear is that polygamy was practiced freely in white communities as well. It was only with the Catholic Church in the 12th century when this was enforced. So for my family history, I can only trace back to like the late 1500s of my family line, because there were no records kept then, as far back as then. There was no such thing as a marriage certificate or a birth certificate or a child being born out of wedlock. And also what we now know as well is that we must remember that African people colonized Europe and the Americas long before slavery. Some people are under the mistaken belief that the first time Black people ever left Africa was during the slave trade, and that's incorrect, because Africa had basically colonized and the rest of the world beforehand. So in our communities in the UK and Europe, it was mostly West African traders and from present-day Nigeria and present-day Sierra Leone that came and colonized in Liverpool, which was a big natural port, just like Lagos in Nigeria is a natural port, and Sierra Leone had their own beautiful natural deep water harbour. So it was basically for trade. So you must understand there as well is that there would be there was no such thing as race. because this race is a thing that was created by the capitalists. But race, there was no such thing. So Liverpool in England was very much a mixed community, we would call it that today. And that is actually, my family are all from Liverpool. My father was the first person who ever came to Africa. So there was a whole community there. And people will remember during the apartheid era in South Africa, and also during Nelson Mandela's imprisonment, and that Liverpool in the UK gave Africa a lot of support. Liverpool in the UK were anti-monarchy. I grew up, my family were anti-monarchy. I was the first of my family to be born on African soil. My mother had been here for 5 generations. But in those days, going back, there would be African sailors and traders that would come to Africa, and they would have wives and children, in Europe, and they would then travel back when the tides were good and the weather was better to go and restock and get more supplies, and they would have wives and children also. It wasn't common, and it didn't happen everywhere, but I'm just saying that in that time there was this mix where there were different, things going on that people don't actually realize. So records back to the 16th century are very scarce, because that is also when the church was enforced in Europe, and then of course with colonialism in Africa, and that is when it became a sin to have more than one wife, and if you had a baby without getting married, the baby was termed a bastard or out of wedlock. So these are all society's beliefs of a different culture, actually not even of a culture, because I can't say that marriage was a white culture then. It was a church culture that was introduced to everybody in Europe and then here during our colonization. And interestingly, and there's lots of biological studies and that about it as well, and I speak out a lot about that we are naturally polygamous. If you look at how I know myself from times I've spent with a Maasai tribe in East Africa, the Maasai are polygamous, and it really, really works. There are structures there that absolutely work. People tend to think it's like a 4, 5 in a bed, 6 romp craze thing. It's absolutely nothing to do with the sexual aspect. It's to do with family togetherness. We never used to have orphans in Africa before we had these marriage rules and that imposed on us. Every child always had a mother and a father, and everybody was always looked after. As one of my Ugandan friends said, and even the ugly woman got to have a husband, which is not very nice, because everybody would get married. And it was all to do with the biggest thing that's breaking us down in Africa as African people is the breakdown of family units, the breakdown of marriages, we see people now hitting and killing elderly, saying that they're witches and everything. As an African, you are raised to respect your elders. Now we are going and killing them, and everything is being turned upside down because African people are going further and further away from their belief systems. And I know from a lot of research I've done, there were solid family units that were here for centuries before marriage was imposed. But it was another control tool by the church, you see. And I think also the church introduced it in Africa to control the population, because they didn't want, they wanted more of them than black people. But the whole thing with it being tied in with the church, I think it's so wonderful now that as humanists, because this is the thing, if you are godless and you want to get married and you want more, you can have, I suppose you can have a court wedding, but with your children, I think the problem that we have, especially as women now, as godless women, there's pressure on us as women to have our babies baptized, christened. Society dictates if you don't marry a man that you're living with and you maybe then, he's got children with lots of other women, it's wrong. And it's really messing up everything. So, because it's become law, you can't break a marriage contract without going through the courts and getting divorced. So I can imagine the churches are against this, because they'll say, oh, it's just like a loose form of marriage and people can then, marriage is not sacred anymore and people can just up and leave. But we are all pretty much still polygamous. I mean, men especially, and I'm not being funny here, you've got your wife and your side chicks, all of you know, but I'm just saying, lots of us have had different relationships, have been married once or twice, or we've had lots of well, now it will be called premarital relationships or sex or whatever. But it's a natural human way. No mammals are really, there are very few mammals that stick together for life. So I just think that this whole thing with us going back now, with so many godless people around Africa that are starting to speak to each other and unite together, and there are so many, there are thousands and thousands of us now in every single African country. We are all standing up against things like this, and we're pushing back and saying we don't want to do it. We know as people that you don't need a marriage certificate and a gold ring on your finger to prove that you love someone or you're committed to them. We all know that. So it's just very sad when I see Black couples, especially now, having these big white religious weddings in church, and because I think that the further we move away from true Black culture, it's the breakdown and the destruction of African society completely. And I just think that it's wonderful that there are now those options, that you can keep the family happy by having a ceremony, but you don't have to bless your marriage, your union, or your children with an invisible supernatural being. You are really just giving thanks, aren't you, to nature and for the person for being alive and for you meeting and for you being healthy and fertile enough to have children and for the children being born and being healthy, and you're just giving thanks to your community, thanks to, that's really what it's all about. And I just think that it's great that it's growing. I know and there's a lot of resistance in especially the Islamic countries that are very controlled with the jihadist aspect as well, because they take it to the extreme where lots of wives and women are really, really subservient and are married from a young age, girls, which is paedophilia. It's just, to me, that's just an excuse to cover up for paedophilia and crimes. But I honestly just think that it's such a personal thing as well. We've allowed ourselves to be dictated to. We've allowed children to grow up with this label over them that they are sinners and they are not as good or as worthy because their parents weren't married. And we've accepted it as African people as being okay. Having kids called bastards or born out of wedlock, not having the right surname or whatever, which is nonsense. I think we've allowed the Western culture to dictate far too much to us as African people, even in personal aspects of our life. I've just got a bit of history on how that started, Kato. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add in the meantime before I just talk myself completely.
No. I want to listen to you, and the audience would like to learn from your perspective first. Please go on, carry on.
Okay. So I just looked a few dates up because our guest tonight, she's had issues with vehicle breakdown, so he's running a little bit late. So we just wanted to do a bit of a filler to fill you all in. It's just that the church, in the 12th century, when the churches were first formed, they were very relaxed about the whole marriage thing. And that would have actually, if it had continued like that, it would have been okay, because nothing was forced. It would have also paved the way for a lot of the LGBT rights and marriages, and it wouldn't have judged children for being born out of wedlock and that. But that was all changed. So it's only about, so scientists have said that up until, it's only 10,000 years ago that we as humans evolved to have monogamous relationships with just one person. And they can see that by the DNA evidence that they've discovered, in things that they are researching all the time, is that the proportion of X and Y, female and male chromosomes, is that there were, the men will love this one, lots of women had children with the same man. So it was very much a case of one man would have children with lots of women. We're not just talking about now, like it's like 4 in traditional cultures, it's about 4 to 6. But just like, I won't go so far as to say any woman, but when you're looking at, I don't know what the exact figures are, there were far more female chromosomes than males in ancient DNA that they've if that makes sense. Sorry, I just put this together quite quickly. But the Catholic Church made marriage a sacrament only in the 13th century. And interestingly, it was because they were getting pressure from the Protestants, who were saying that the Catholics weren't taking marriage seriously enough. So it took a while for it to actually really take place. And then of course they clamped down quite quickly. And this I actually found quite humorous, because what they try to promote, so this is their marketing tactic. They try to promote marriage as all being around it being a sexual union, an everlasting threesome with God. And I promise you, that was in 539 BC. That is absolutely, it's written in history, is that you agreed to have an everlasting threesome with God. I mean, really. So the strict religious conformity in marriage was in the 16th century. And it started to come in then that single people were less holy than married people. Interestingly, so because I suppose they had lots of sexual partners, so the idea, it was seen as not being holy, and lots of children with different women in that. So, and that was also mainly put on the woman. The woman was seen as not as holy, but a man, just like today, if a man has 4 girlfriends, it's okay. But if a married woman had 4 boyfriends, it would be, it's just that whole stigma. So the whole thing, which I could also see from what I've observed, and that is that what the church does in every aspect of a person's life is they control it. I mean, here they were not only controlling the most sacred thing, but sex between a man and a woman, but the way you chose to raise your children, how your children were labeled. It's putting obligations to the church before cultural traditions and obligations, because whereas before, Kato, you would say have your first wife and 2 or 3, like you guys in Buganda, you had lots of, and whole compounds of wives, didn't you? I'm saying, but they like, you would be, no, it wasn't just 4 wives for the Ugandans. So I'm just saying, but it worked. And, the children, everybody always raised everybody else's kids. And if I look at myself as a mother, I'm good with some things, I'm terrible with other things. I never had patience to sit and do crafts and little things with my kids, but I loved reading to them and cooking with them and that. I think that the children that I know that have been raised with lots of mothers, and even today, and a lot of atheist adults have grown up with having lots of mothers, they're all very well balanced. You've got the shy mother, you've got the outgoing mother, you've got the mother that's good at maths, and you've got the mother that's good at reading, and you've got the mother that helps them when they've got emotional issues or things they've got to sort out, and then you've got the fun mother. And I just think that's much more balanced, stable, secure family units, and not so much, there was no such thing as bastards or whatever. It's just the children, everyone is mother, and it's a very close relationship that they have with each other. And with all the war and everything that we went through in Africa that we're still going through today, and it's just heartbreaking, because I say that we are a continent of broken women, because all our men are either dead, or they are incarcerated, or they've disappeared, or they're running for their lives, or you're living in constant fear. And my heart goes out especially to the devastation of what's been going on in Uganda for years, because there are single mothers right across Uganda, and we are raising, and it's in Nigeria and places as well, all over Africa. You look at the Sudan and Ethiopia, we are raising the next generation of African people in broken homes where they don't even know who their fathers are. And if we look at cases like with Mubarak Bala, he was taken when his son was 6 weeks old. So his son is 3 now and doesn't know his father at all. But I'm not saying him in particular, but children are growing up with the stigma that their father's in prison, or, their father left their mother. But meanwhile, father's disappeared or been abducted, and It's been kept somewhere no one knows where. And I see this in the refugee camps in Kenya as well. Some of the women have said to me is that their children can't understand why they don't just find themselves another husband. Well, daddy's not coming back, so you must get yourself another husband, because the children know they're more protected with a man there. So it's very, very difficult how we are raising, our stars made an appearance, we are raising our children completely differently to how we were raised, Kato, and that wasn't that long ago. I mean, we're not talking about 200 years ago, great-great-great-grandparents. I mean, I was fortunate to grow up in a stable family unit. My father was away a lot because he did a lot of work for fighting for independence from British rule. So he wasn't at home. But as a child, I grew up knowing that was normal. I just thought it was normal that everyone was like that. But now our children are just growing up with no even grandparents, grandfathers aren't present, aunts and uncles, and especially in Uganda, you have such a wide gap. And in the other countries as well, like I'm not sure of Kenya's exact statistics, but there's such a wide gap between the youth and the elderly. It's just, I don't know, it's all so simple if you think of it, how we allow ourselves to get into all these traditional roles and things that go against everything that we are as African people. So I just think it's wonderful that we are slowly coming back to this now. And the nice thing with this is that there are no rules or regulations. They are the kind of ceremonies and I don't want to use the word rituals, but you can make your own words and your own meaning up for honoring the life of a newborn baby, which can be specific to that baby or that relationship. And it's also very inclusive of same-sex marriages, of people that are divorced, or people who are single but are bringing children into a marriage, because there was also a bit of a stigma about that. And I just think it's really good, because I think that we really need to focus a lot on unity. We don't even have unity in our relationships and in our families, let alone in our tribes or our countries or with neighboring countries. And it all starts at home, So that's my little bit on that. But it's just very interesting, because just the one thing I want to point out, this is to do with the Bible as well, is that how marriage used to be, which is how it's interesting what Cyrus can explain to us today exactly how it's done, is that it was valid if it was a mutual consent between two people. There didn't have to be a witness present. But the one thing that they stipulated, this is before they had all the legal documents out of the church, is that marriage could only be sealed with sexual intercourse. So that was the priority, funnily enough. That if you had sex with that person, you were then together with them, locked them for that was for life. And the woman, would know that was a man that she was with. But then what happened, and I never knew this, in the middle of the 12th century, Peter of Lombard, who was a bishop in Paris, started to raise questions about the whole Joseph and Mary story, because he said, if the church is preaching that marriage is only valid if you've had sexual intercourse, how are we going to explain Mary and Joseph? Because, I never knew this, and I thought, wow. So the church then realized, well, they were being a bit hypocritical. Because, of course, it's all written, made up stuff, all this nonsense in the Bible. They got caught up, just like, why are there no dinosaurs in the Bible? Well, the Bible was written after they went extinct, that kind of thing. But it was like, hold on, guys, one of the main draw cards that we're using is this whole Jesus thing, the virgin birth and Jesus being crucified on the cross. But now how can you be preaching this when they didn't have sex? It was a miraculous virginal birth, so they actually aren't valid in the eyes of the Lord. So then they had to, he said, if sex is what makes marriage valid, then Mary and Joseph's whole thing, it just goes out the window. So then they formalized it after that. It had to be.
But I understand that Mary and Joseph later on had children, don't you?
Yes, and I always wonder why the three wise men came there. I think those 3 wise men were thinking, could be mine, could be mine, could be mine. Let's go and have a look. They were all like, Joseph and the 3 wise men, they were like, oh, thank goodness I'm not going to have to pay maintenance for the next 18 years. But seriously, it really is. So I'm just saying is that, and then with that, they also started prohibiting divorce. And then it was at the same time that came into place, that it was, divorce was forbidden, and it was monogamous relationships only. But then what happened is that there would be instances where people would get married, and I don't know how, whether it was maybe babies being born with defects or whatever, but they realized that there were a lot of cousins that were getting married, people that didn't realize they were related. So they then realized that they had to allow divorce in circumstances like that, because I don't know, they were maybe having like one-eyed children and stuff. But also remember that Adam and Eve supposedly populated the whole earth. So there were never any defects with Adam and Eve. But when they introduced religion and people started marrying their cousins, that also threw the whole Adam and Eve thing out, didn't it? So it's just very interesting, because I never paid much attention to the whole history of things like this, because I wasn't that interested in religion. And, you know, it's like for most of us, as soon as you can, you leave home or you go and study or you're out on your own, is when you leave it. You know the teachings of the Bible and all that. But how it was actually, and this is what I found so interesting now with all the awareness about Egyptian history and all the old Egyptian teachings and that, many of which the Bible was built off and twisted around. That's something that I'm really getting interested in now too, because I would never normally be interested in how the whole church was set up and what rules they put in place. But we have to know these things, even if they're boring or we don't want to know about them, because it helps us form such a better picture of where we are today as people and everything that we face. So that was just my little interesting thing that I just thought I'd share. I didn't plan it, so I waffled on a bit, sorry. It was just like a quick.
Thank you very much for such a wonderful presentation on that perspective on marriages. Of course, you have touched on traditional Africa. You have mentioned how it was done in traditional Africa before they introduced the marriages as we know today. Of course, we ask ourselves as people in Africa, but of course, even beyond Africa, how were people doing it before the introduction of the formal way of marriage? Of course, Todd Mayer here just sent a message. Who is viewing us is giving his own example where he had to go to a judge and then get married. Of course, that is another type of marriage which is secular, but that is more of a state organized marriage, where you simply walk with your Linda and you go to the State Department that officiates on marriages, and then you go through the process, and then we have what we call a civil marriage. So I think, Todd, you are talking about a civil marriage, which is without the gods, because it must be secular, like in terms of our setting in Uganda. And now we are talking about this time humanist marriages, which are organized by trained secular atheist humanist individuals who are professionals trained to officiate on a marriage. And by the way, when you talk about ceremonies, we're not talking about marriages only. Thanks to Linda to discuss marriages, but we are talking about a halo of different ceremonies. Yes. You did mention children naming, or the naming ceremonies. Those are part of ceremonies we're talking about here, where you have your baby, and your baby is, you have a function which gives this baby a name, and then you give promises to this baby. You have this wonderful function without involving gods. And exactly. We are specific when you say gods. Not about Jesus alone and the God in heaven, the hair of 1,000 gods.
Exactly.
In Africa, Linda, you know that we have had different gods. We have had our own gods. So this time we are saying all these gods, Linda, not applicable in our own thinking. We think all these gods are mere pups, and we think we can do our with ceremonies, which include marriages, which include baby namings, which include funerals. I've talked about a scenario when I'm dead, Lynda, and then he was born again. He saw Jesus at the last minute. You know, they often want to own you when you are dead because they know you are useless. They know you cannot defend. One of the reasons why I wanted to have professional celebrants.
I've lost Kato there. I don't know if it's just me.
With dignity in a state in which I want to be sent off. An atheist have been, because there was a lacuna, there was a gap where people like us who have been openly atheist would hijack our families by lack of a profession, and then they will say, he got saved, he saw Jesus, he saw God. Then we'll see a cross on my coffin, you know, on my. People who are secular want to do away with. So when we talk about secular ceremonies, ceremonies without God, be it marriage, be it a funeral, be it a baby naming, you have even mentioned very important things, Lynda, in your submission. You talk about.
I keep losing you, Kato. I just want to check.
If I can say, was at one point universal, if I can say. At one point, almost all cultures practiced it.
Yes.
We cannot even tie it only to Africans. It was done in Europe, it was done in Asia, it was done in so many cultures. People had multiple women. It began with kings having thousands or hundreds. The Bible talks about a king who had thousands. I don't even know how he made it, but that's the Bible anyway. They are fictitious stories. But the point is that across the globe, men had so many women. We are not here to promote such culture, in my view, that may be breaking down women's rights, that may be taking women as property, as things to be, you know, taken for the pride of man. But we are talking about a situation where people can agree. I was looking at, I was reading through a post from Kenya where one woman is married to 3 men in one house. Just recently.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
One of the posts. yeah. So just recently in Kenya, if you Google it, there is a woman who is married to 3 men. And that is frowned upon. And the interview, yes, and we are happy with it. I saw similar interviews in the US where a woman has 2 men. So, Lynda, it's not about one man having many wives, but it can also be the reverse, where a woman, 3 men, if they so agree. To me, I won't have any problem with that. So I want these humanist ceremonies to go beyond what we have been seeing.
Yes.
Can we have laws that are exactly? Can we have a man and a woman are comfortable to have an extra partner in their marriage? Who is me to say no? If a woman is willing to have 2 husbands and they are happy and they can work it out, then that law is anti their rights. That is my view, if you ask me. So it's going beyond the African tradition where a man has to be with 4 women, 5 women. Today, Islam allows a man with capabilities and with the acceptance of the first wife to have a second wife, and with the acceptance of the second wife, and it goes up to 4 women. If people think it's right for a Muslim man to do that, why is it not right for a Muslim woman to do that? It will be the biggest question, because it means when you allow a man to do that, you are making it a law that favors men. You are making it a system that breaks women's rights.
Sure.
If it's okay for a man to have 3, 4 women, what's wrong with a woman to have 3, 4 men? Because if that's the game we want to play, let's play. That is equity. That is fairness.
Sure.
So we're talking about laws that simply look at man and promote the man to the detriment of a woman. So when people say one man, one wife, to me, I have no quarrel with that. If the couple wants that, so be it. But what if we have a scenario where a couple is willing to have a second wife? Maybe for reasons unknown to us, for reasons best known to them, and the couple says, please, my husband, I allow you to get a second woman. For these reasons, I'm okay with it. Why should the church, why should the law say, do not do that?
Exactly.
I mean, can we have laws that are flexible, that can allow this couple do things that make them happy? Lynda, today we have so many families that are breaking down. You have talked about single mothers, and that's rampant in Africa. That's rampant in African American societies back in the US. So many families where you have single mothers. And here is an opportunity, I will quote an opportunity where a man who is already married is willing to take over a single mother with a child or with children. And if the couple has no problem, if the wife to me has no problem with that arrangement, so be it. Because in doing so, Lynda, you are giving an opportunity this woman to have a husband. Two, and you are giving an opportunity these children to have a role figure as a father. That what if a father died for these children and there is a chance to have another man raising them as their own? What would be the problem with that? What would be the problem with that if the children won't be hurt, if the woman and other partners are happy with it? So in my submission, I'm talking about having laws that are flexible, which is not the case today. That even when you talk about humanist ceremonies, we are still talking about how it is done in Europe, how the law looks at it. We are not being realistic that couples may decide to do otherwise, that couples may do things that suit them. Why are we not allowing them to do things the way they want? If we are saying we are liberal, if you are saying we want people to be free to choose to do as they so wish, why do we say it must be between man and woman? What if it's between man and man and they're happy with it? Why should we in Africa say no?
Exactly. And
we are talking about marriage because we have seen it from a biblical angle. In Africa, we know that there was a time when women married women. I know people don't read, but it's all for you to go simply Google. Were there women that married women in Africa? Google will give you the answer. Google will give you the tribes where some women were allowed to marry women in given situations. And such marriages existed, where a woman, instead of a man, will take the bride wealth to the family and say, I'm the one marrying. But how were those marriages conducted, and why were they being done in Africa? And why were they being considered as legitimate? They were done in Africa. But people don't want to read. Out of ignorance, they're going to say, no, they were not there, but they were there. So we can have all these kinds of marriages as long as we have laws that are flexible enough to allow people be. There are situations when we can allow them. For example, we have talked about illegitimate children. It is true. The marriages that were introduced in Africa by the missionaries introduced what we call the illegitimate child.
Exactly, the bastard.
A child born out of wedlock was declared illegitimate. Think about me having a child with a partner I haven't married, and you call my child illegitimate, and by law illegitimate. until when people went to court recently in Uganda, and then it was declared null and void to declare any child illegitimate. Today in Uganda, by law, there's no child who is illegitimate. But prior to the law, children. And you can't imagine, my father married my mother. I will give my own example. My father married my mother in church, in a Catholic church. So I was born in a wedlock. But my father went ahead and got other
You broke up there, Kato.
children of my father from other women illegitimate. And that's not fair. These are my siblings. These are my brothers and sisters. How dare you call them illegitimate? So can we have marriages that consider all these children as worthy children we talk about? So when you talk about these ceremonies, back to the main question of ceremonies, talking about these ceremonies, can we that consider, sorry?
Your sound keeps going off. I don't know if it's me. I'm just checking with production.
Yeah, you can't hear me, Linda?
You keep going off. I'm only getting bits of your conversation, but it's fine. I can hear you now. I don't know if it's my network.
Okay. Now, I'll conclude on this, and then I'll invite you again to make your more submission on this. I'm simply saying that we should allow people to decide the course they want to take their life into. We shouldn't be so restrictive as people in Africa, because we're talking about Africa today. Marriage shouldn't be defined by us, by laws left to us by the colonizers. Laws that were so restrictive. Laws that define how and who to marry, who to love. We should accept that people are people and they can make choices. But we shouldn't be the one to define their choices. We should allow them to make their own choices. As long as these choices don't hurt anyone, to me, I will be okay with having choices that reflect happiness, reflect love for the couples. Back to you, Linda.
Well, it's just so right, Kato. To me, it's almost like having our speech, our freedom of speech and freedom of religion restricted. Those are personal things. It's like which football team you support. Nobody can dictate to you. You can only support Chelsea or Manchester United. That's or whatever. You've got to. So for me, a lot of the laws we have are really stupid. We understand as intelligent humans that there are certain laws that you stick to in life to do with not doing crime and with things that you do and don't do. But I don't know why there is such an input on people's personal lives, because at the end of the day, a relationship, whether it be a homosexual relationship or a relationship where you have several partners, children, it's nobody's damn business. That is something that is unique and it's different between each couple and each person. And this is also what really gets me very irate with the people who are always slamming and saying awful things about the LGBT community. All they fixated on, the religious people, and it is mostly the religious that judge them, is, the idea of it, the sexual side of it, which is so shallow, because a loving relationship with any person that you're in a sexual relationship with, sex is just one aspect of it. It's so much more, and there are same-sex couples that I know more stable, secure relationships or marriages than my heterosexual friends do. They support each other, they stand by each other, they are there for the ups and downs, they both share the workload, they both share the financial load, raising children. They're doing it a lot better than a lot of the opposite sex marriages are. But the opposite sex are the ones that are, what have you got to do to judge someone for a friendship and all that? They just think of the sexual aspect of it. So it doesn't appeal to you, it's fine. There's certain things, I don't like eating potatoes, but you do. I'm not going to kill you or judge you over it. But the real irony, and I think that I want to actually write something or do something that we can put out there, because people must realize this whole thing, especially in Zimbabwe and Uganda, with the presidents Mugabe and Museveni, who have come up with this, it's a Western thing, it's Western culture. I just want to say this. Every single person that is judging LGBT people is judging it from a religious perspective of their white Western God and religion. Every single person that is wanting to ban gay marriages and everything. In Uganda and Zimbabwe, it's a big thing with the people there because of what the presidents have said, not so much in other countries. It's not a Western thing. We don't want this in Africa. We don't want it in Africa. Say they who are worshipping a Western God and basing their moral values on Western indoctrinated enslavement culture, they don't see the irony in it, because it's the religious that judge, just like it's the religious people that will judge if you have a baby without getting married or you divorce your husband. It's the religious that are always pointing fingers, but they are hypocrites. And I just say that my retort now with people when they say it's not a Western thing, it's not African, it's not African, then I just say, just check yourself as to which traditions you are getting married according to Western culture. You are worshipping a God that is a Western white God. You are running legal systems and everything on taking oaths. But yet they are pointing out, only because it is an intimate sexual thing, then they feel they can judge on it. It's just so hypocritical. I just wish people could open their eyes and see it for what it is. Even just the story that I've just learned about Mary and Joseph, with the church going, whoopsie, we're going to have to change that practice, because, I mean, people need to open their eyes and just see it for what it is. You know, and also there's this whole idea that we used to be so subservient in Africa, and that a man who's got 4 wives, they are all like slaves, you know, sex slaves, and spend their whole day working and cleaning and everything and serving the man. It's not like that. It is, and a lot of the Islamic, it is enforced slavery that they're getting away with. I'm talking about in normal African cultural ways, pre-colonialism, going way back. It was just very much, like you said, Kato, as well, with people that were widowed. I know that a lot of our tribes in Africa, and even some today in remote areas, if a woman's husband died, then the brother would take her on as a wife as well, so that she would be protected. A lot of the reasons why there were marriages of more than one wife was also because you had lots of land and lots of crops to farm and that. So obviously you needed lots of people to man the land. I get so cross when I hear Europeans saying that people have just got lots and lots of children and everything. They don't understand that children and cattle are your wealth, and black people just have lots of children because they get lobola, bride price, for all the girls. So they're trying to have as many girls as possible. It's absolute bullshit, excuse my language. The perceived belief out there about African people, it's not like that at all. And people are also growing up with that stigma, which is pushing us further away from our culture. Like I said, we all knew there are laws and things you have to conform to in society, but not when it comes to personal things. Children are growing up, especially black children, who have always, because the black race has always been made to feel that they are not as worthy, not as good, when they are actually so much better, more advanced and superior and educational civilization wise. But it's like my mom always said to me, you can take a beautiful cat, and if you say it's an ugly cat, it's an ugly cat, it's an ugly cat, it will eventually become an ugly cat. You know, it won't start looking after itself and everything. People need to stand up and realize that we've got to start thinking for ourselves and deciding what we want is right for us, because our liberties are being taken away in every single way. I'm very suspicious of this Harris, whatever woman, coming over with all this aid they're offering Zambia and who are the other 2 countries for LGBT rights. They never do anything that's in our interest, our best interest as people. So I don't know what their LGBT promotion agenda is, but there's something going on there. There's no ways they would willingly come over here to speak to 3 countries. They're promoting and putting so much money into LGBT rights when half that money, even a quarter of that money, could be used to help with conditions in our prisons, with human rights, with children and people that are being trafficked across this continent every day. Are they using LGBT as another tool, which is then going to impact? Sorry, I'm going off topic here now. It's just a thought I had in my head, because Malema's been shouting his mouth off in support of Museveni with the LGBT thing. And my argument is, why aren't you standing up about all the other problems going on in your country? And why aren't you standing up for everything, all the human rights abuses in Uganda? Why are you only standing up for this thing? You see, Kato, I'm just worried also that the whole LGBT thing is going to be somehow used as a tool against them as well. I don't know. I never know what these evil people have got up their minds next, but we'll figure it out. So, sorry, that just came into it with the whole LGBT thing, because it's a big thing that we're facing on our continent at the moment, because it's persecuting, and it's also, there again, it's enabling people to kill other people and be justified for doing it. You know, it's like the Islamic extremists that can behead somebody and it's okay. They're getting away with murder. You know, the LGBT community are getting picked on. We need to unite as African people. It doesn't matter if people are religious, irreligious, gay, straight, whatever. It's all the good people need to unite together in a force against all the evil. I don't see how we can be discriminating. We're already discriminating race, tribe, state, region, country, continent. Now we're starting to discriminate against our own and opposite genders and get involved in people's relationships. Every single thing that's been done has been designed to split us further and further and further apart, because then we're easier to manage and control. And I stand against this. But like you say, Kato, it's all very well for us to go along with the humanist way of doing things, but then we're going to still hit brick walls when it comes to, man, you worth dies and you need, you know, you like these inheritance to look after the children, or you go and book a child into school and they'll say, sorry, we need your marriage certificate and we need the father's birth certificate and the mother's birth certificate. You see, so there's this element of control. We are still at some stage going to have to conform by agreeing to systems and laws. Otherwise, we will not be recognized as being valid in society because of these rules and regulations, which are also not African things. So I don't know, there's so many frustrations around this whole topic.
Yes, I would add something there. There's a viewer, Dean Kruger, is making a very interesting submission.
Yes, Atheist Republic in Durban.
He is making very interesting submissions there. We are reading your comments, Dean Kruger, and thank you so much for giving us that wonderful feedback. Of course, we're saying we're proud to see free-thinking individuals in Africa sharing these ideas. Thank you so much, Dean. Lynda, to add more on what you are saying, what we are discussing today is the ability to have secular ceremonies in Africa, the possibility of having ceremonies without gods in them. And of course, we are saying that the gods are not only the gods as imported, but also the gods found in Africa. We know that we had so many gods beyond the God we know from Western ideologies and all that. But of course, the gods in Africa, which involved sacrifices, which involved lots of fetishes and all that, we are saying no to this kind of thinking, Lynda. So, as free thinkers, as atheists, as humanists, we don't promote any of these gods. Because, Lynda, today, I know in my country, Uganda, there are people who believe in these traditional religions. There are people who are already practicing traditional marriages, which in practice, when you look at them, they are still patriarchal. So there is no I'm going to stand here and promote a practice that promotes marriage of minors, Linda. There is no I can stand here and promote that practice because it is against all fundamental human rights. It puts the girl child down. There is no I'm going to support Muslims when they have a teaching which promotes marrying a girl as soon as she hits her menstruation. There's no I'm going to support. Yeah, there's no I'm going to support such kind of practice, such kind of belief, such kind of culture, because it's against the girl child. Linda, as humans, as free thinkers, as practitioners, we want to promote values that are pro-people, that are pro-rights, that don't put one gender, one sex, one set of people down and promote others. This is why we are not in tandem with what the church is preaching, with what the mosque is preaching, because they have a narrative. They are simply telling you a man must marry one woman. A woman has no right of say, for example, in divorce. You talked about divorce in one of your submissions earlier on. You talked about divorce, Linda. And when you look at divorce and look at Islam, for example, it makes a woman divorcing a man so hard.
Exactly.
The biblical teachings also makes divorce so hard for a woman. It makes it easier for a man to divorce, but so hard for a woman to divorce in some biblical teachings. And they carry on this kind of unfairness to the women in modern day marriages. So I want to see a marriage setting which makes divorce easier, Linda, which makes marriage easier. If I want to marry you, we sit down, draft an agreement, make it easier for me to live, easier for you to live, on terms that are conducive for me and you to be in this union, and to separate or leave it as soon as we think it cannot work out. Linda, today we have so many broken marriages that are still marriages in the world, in Africa, in Europe, because people fear, what will my society think? What will my church say? What will my father, my family say if I leave this marriage? And at the end of the day, we have so many homicides, people killing each other. We have so many broken marriages, so many dysfunctional marriages. People are not happy within the marriage setting. How do we make marriages work? How do we make divorce easier for people so that they don't kill themselves, so that they don't remain in marriages that suck, Linda? So we want marriages that work for people, not that marriages that make them prisoners in the name of getting married. So, Linda, these are some issues we want to see. Secular marriages must be flexible, must be marriages that work for both the parties, not one party only, the two parties. And as we can see, we have some photos of one of the humanist marriages we had in Kenya. Of course, Dan Beaton is following us. I've just seen his messages. Dan Beaton there marrying his Kenyan fiancée in 2019. I was happy to be in Kenya to witness this marriage. I had to move all the way from Uganda, go to Kenya and see one of these secular marriages, humanist marriages being done in Kenya. And that's Daniel Beaton.
He's Humanist Global Charity, isn't he?
Yes.
Humanist Global Charity, yeah. He's a very good writer, and he's done a lot of programs in Nigeria as well with humanist schooling, critical thinking. Yeah, lovely.
Yes. Yes, so I did attend that marriage, and of course it was officially by a humanist, Cyrus Wanjohi, will be joining us in the next episode of these ceremonies. Had a technical issue today, couldn't be able to join, but that's the marriage, as you can see. That's the ceremony, as you can see in the photo. It was a lovely, lovely ceremony on the beach. It was so special that we had to do it outdoor, not indoor. And they had their own well-crafted vows, which are personal to them, in the open, with music, with poetry, with love and ambience that was so good for all of us that attended. So that is one example of a humanist ceremony, a humanist wedding that can be done without the gods. We are not invoking incarnations here. We are not citing any rosary. We are not making any prayers up. We are simply reciting the words that are agreed on by the couple. So it was very unique. It was very personal. It was client-tailored. You ask them what they want and you give them exactly what they want. And what makes these ceremonies so unique, they are so brief that within 30 minutes we are done. It's personal, it's lively. You can do it wherever you want. You can go in the trees, you can go on the beach, you can be in a bar. That is Cyrus Wanjohi celebrating, officiating this this ceremony. So this is what makes humanist ceremonies special. They are up to you, Lynda, to decide how you want it to go, your way, your own phrasing, your own words. You are using your own terms to have this ceremony. It's about you, it's personal. There's no one who's going to threaten you by, if you divorce, God won't be happy. If you are married, you must behave godly. What is godly here? You must define things the way people want, the way the couple wants their marriage to go, to be. They set their own terms. They can separate as soon as they find out it doesn't work. Marriage is not a prison. Marriage should be a conducive environment for everyone to live in. If they cannot live in, let them go out on their own terms. Things that work for them, not for society. Lynda, your take on this as you see these photos?
No, it's lovely. And I think with this kind of thing as well, is it's very inclusive. It doesn't mean that it's only for godless people. You get a lot of marriages today between Christians and Muslims, or Christians and Hindus, or one of them is godless and one is still religious. And sometimes you get, you know, there's tensions between the families as to what sort of ceremony they should have or whatever. I think with this kind of a ceremony, it's pleasing both sides of both mother-in-laws, both mothers or whatever, because you're not following one particular way of doing things. So it is very inclusive. And it doesn't matter if you're divorced or you've got other children. I mean, the wonderful thing with a ceremony like this is that I've even seen them, or where, say, the woman has children from a previous marriage. So the children will be part of the actual ceremony, where they will say like family vows, or they'll say like a family sort of thing, how they want to go forward now as a unified family with not biological children of the man. It's just wonderful. It's just inclusive, and it's just it's how we are as humans. And I also think that we've been sold this whole romance, roses, champagne, Valentine's Day, rose petals on the bed. That's actually just like, that's not love. That's not romance. And I see now so many women, you know, I'm more speaking from as a woman, who put too much emphasis on that in a relationship. A man must prove his love to me by what he can buy me, by the nice restaurants he can take me to, by what clothes he can buy me, or I can have my hair done or whatever, and a nice latest model iPhone. It's so far removed from who we are. And we're putting too much emphasis on things like that now, when we should be really getting back to our roots. And like you said as well, every relationship is different, and every marriage is personal to those people. And marriage isn't, and they lived happily ever after. People change. If you know, I got married, well, I was with my husband when I was still quite young, and we were together for a long time. And, you know, you change over that time, from when you're like in your late teens, early 20s, to years later when you've had children and everything. You grow, you don't always become closer. You grow, your interests differ, and you realize that you are actually not compatible anymore. You change so much, especially in Africa, with everything that we are subjected to, you know, a lot more with the rawness of life, is that we often change. And I think it should be, I have an excellent relationship with my ex-husband. He's just happy that I'm not there to talk his ear off all the time. I even talk in my sleep. But I'm just saying, we really, it's like a cliche thing we get on. Okay, he lives in East Africa, so I don't have to see him that often, thank goodness. Well, no, but you'd probably get on my nerves if I saw him more than a couple of times a year. But we get on well because we mutually co-parent our children. They are our most important thing that came out of our marriage. So, and it's not forced or anything. And we get on well together. I mean, he accepts other guys, and if he's with other women, I mean, we've been divorced now since 2010, so it's been a long time. But I'm just saying, is that to me, it works because the children have grown up. You know, these children that are grown up where they now feel they are criminals from when they're little because they've been told at school that they don't have two parents, so there's something wrong with you. And it's our children. And I just look at all the abandoned babies, the stories, they come up all over the world, but there have been quite a few in South Africa in particular, more so than in other countries, that maybe it's just because they're in the news more. Women abandoning newborn babies, giving birth in public toilets and leaving their babies in bus stations and in the back of taxis and things, because they're too ashamed to admit that they have had premarital sex, because it goes against what the church dictates. Children, we've got human beings, newborn babies that are being thrown down toilets because women are having so much guilt, or they're killing themselves for just having sexual intercourse. It's a normal part of life, but because it's been dictated to her that it's wrong and she's a sinner, and she's going to be shamed. It happened with Europeans as well. There were so many girls that were separated from their babies, and their babies were taken and put into orphanages all over the world. It's when the church got involved with this that we started having such a problem with orphans and everything. I mean, I remember I grew up in Zimbabwe, and every Christmas we used to go to an orphanage and take all our old toys and clothes and everything. My mother, I just have memories from when I was very small. It was like you had to find an orphanage. Orphanages were not, there was one orphanage and it had mixed, you know, it had children of, well, white, black children, Indian children, because they were, you know, their parents had been killed in the war and that. But now it's just, we've got street children, we've got children addicted to drugs, we've got children that are being left abandoned, we've got children that are being trafficked, babies that are being raped. I mean, so quickly we've moved away from how African culture and family units used to be. We're not talking about, when our great-great-great-grandparents were alive. We're talking about our parents, our grandparents, the people that we can still touch and feel. It's rapidly, everything has changed.
To give in something little on what I was saying, just to add on, of course, there's something I've observed which is done perfectly with a secular or humanist ceremony. Humanist ceremonies are less expensive, Linda. Yes. When you look at the marriages the way they are today, the ceremony the way they are today, especially in Africa, Linda, people are selling their properties to marry.
I know.
To have a lavish ceremony. People are going to banks to get loans to marry women. This is dangerous. This show-off is dangerous. And now, what makes a human ceremony special is that you can have few people you want, because it's personal, it's about you. Linda, you can have 4 people in a ceremony and that's it. You can have 10 people in a ceremony, that's it. You can have it on a beach, you can have it in a bar. I mean, what secular ceremonies, human ceremonies, what makes them unique is, among others, making them affordable for everyone to have them,
Definitely.
so that it's part and personal. Lynda, if you can have your partner go through a marriage process where you can spend as little as, say, $500 or $1,000, so be it. When we can have just a few guests. But what is happening with this church wedding, with other weddings, is it's all about showing off. They leave people in too much debt. Yet this ceremony should be personal. So this is one of the things that makes these ceremonies really, human ceremonies, very personal, because you can decide how many people can I have, where can I have it that is convenient to me, how do I have this ceremony without staying in debt. As you can see there in the photos, Cyrus Wanjohi is celebrating that ceremony, officiating that ceremony at a beach, in the open.
Beautiful.
And people are there for a few minutes and they are home and it's personal. So when we have the next episode, Lynda, we are going to have a celebrants with us here who will take us through these ceremonies, but also tell us how flexible, how unique they are. Lynda, we have 10 minutes to go to the closure of this show. It's going to be about an introduction today. I would like you to give us your parting shot on how you would be your proposal towards making Africa better in terms of organizing secular ceremonies.
I think that the more I haven't been invited to any secular ceremonies here in Africa, whereas if you're in the UK, it's very rare to be invited to any kind of ceremony, I believe, that is actually held in a church and is religious. So we have to start normalizing things like that, just like we have to normalize LGBT and everything else. And a lot of this responsibility falls on us, the godless Africans, because we are the most open-minded and accepting to these different ways. And we don't judge. Well, we'll do the secular ceremony, but sorry, we're not, because it's two men getting married. We don't. No, we are inclusive, which is how Africa always used to be. We are going back to how things were. Like Dean has also said with some of the things he's put there too. It's Kato, you and I last year, I think we did a series of 4 shows where we really went into the research, and we had Beryl, who is actually studying literature and getting all that info in it. Very, very interesting. And why should we be ashamed of things, ashamed of a child born out of marriage, ashamed that you've got a brother or a sister that's married to a same-sex person? It's only because society has imposed those things on us. And I just see more and more divisions, which is why we need to go to these small secular things, where women are being taught to love, obey, and adore and serve God, and not like their husbands, because it's seen as a subservient thing. And look at all these churches where 15 women all go for a prayer meeting, and then 9 months later they're all having babies, but the pastor's impregnated them. It's all, the church is now hiding everything in the open. They're now raping women and raping kids, and it's all and killing people for witchcraft, and it's all becoming okay. So I really think that we need to be a voice of reason. I think we need to maybe start promoting it in each other's countries. I know we have a secular society in South Africa, but I'm not really involved with the day-to-day culture here. But we need to start putting it on Facebook and speaking to people about it, and for people to find out, because everybody now is looking for work and jobs. People will always spend money on weddings and things. So if we could get a few good people qualified in each country that can start performing, it's also an income, an excellent income.
I'll come in right there, Lynda. I'll come in right there, Lynda, and tell you, yes. Of course, you know that we have trained celebrants in different countries in Africa. Yes. As I say, right now we have celebrants in Uganda, we have celebrants in Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Malawi, Nigeria, Ghana, and other countries, Lynda. And of course, South Africa, where you are, Lynda. Lynda, you are aware that in South Africa, they are doing human ceremonies.
Yes, it's secular, but we never see them. They never publicize them.
Yeah, that's the research you need to make. thanks to Dean Kruger, is saying that religions made Africans get ashamed of their sexuality.
Exactly.
That's the comment I'm reading from Dean Kruger right now. And you are right, dead right. I mean, religion has made people hate their sexuality, hate their cultures, seeing some cultures as better off and other cultures as evil. That's what religion has reduced Africans to, because we were made to demonize what was part of us and embrace whatever the colonizer, whatever the missionary said was right thing to do, we embraced without asking questions. This is how we lost it in Africa. We thought that whatever the missionary said was the way to go, that was the way to go. We never asked questions. We were made to hate what was truly our own culture, and then we embraced whatever we were fed into. Of course, Lynda, we have been saying, yes, cultures in Africa we need to discard. We have just given the example of marrying minors. That if someone is not 18 years old, get married to this person is a child. That's a retrogressive cultural practice. We agree. But embracing everything to the door, the Bible and the Quran said, made us blind to reality. We forgot ourselves. We embraced so many things that couldn't work in our explains why we have so many broken families in Africa today. Because there are values we left. A man has men, but simply caters for the so-called main woman. Because that's what the society has accepted. You know, we have religious people having children, but they cannot take care of these children. They cannot play the role figure because the church will. We know, Lynda, I know priests in Africa that have children, but they cannot play father figure. They cannot do their roles in open because the church says no.
Also, with same-sex couples that want to adopt children, there are so many unwanted children and orphans that would have a wonderful...
We are saying...
I'm getting a crossover with the sound here.
And of course, we are saying, Lynda, if I add on the joiner there, we are saying, Lynda,
I've lost you, Kato.
Just 3 minutes. I'd like to have your conclusion on this, and then we say bye-bye for this show.
Yes, sorry, I didn't hear that, but I'll just end now. And Todd Mayer as well, just to add, it's very expensive. We forget as well that the men are responsible for those children and for the wives, for their upkeep. It costs a lot of money. Yeah, Todd's right there. So I'm really I'm sorry that Cyrus couldn't make it on the show today. We're really looking forward to having him. We're quite booked up with our shows, I think, until the end of May now. So we'll have him on again, you know, and we can discuss a lot of things that have come up today, and with a lot of the questions and feedback we've got, then we can structure the next show as well around that. And what we'll do, I think we said, is put a link after the video so people can see. You can follow up on a website, or if you want to find out about being able to perform these ceremonies yourself. And I would say that even if you don't want to do it, it's a life skill, I think, to learn. I'd like to learn how it's actually the way that the ceremonies are conducted, and it's just an extra thing to have that you can add to your knowledge base, and reach out to people who do these ceremonies and have been doing them successfully around Africa, and make them more widely known. I think probably, though, I know a lot of wedding venues and that you'll go to look at like cakes or flowers or whatever, there'll always be adverts there for other services that you need. I would imagine that in Africa, at the wedding place, the wedding venues and that are not promoting secular people that can give secular ceremonies as much, because it's less money for them. You're going to have people that are going to want to have a simple wedding on the beach rather than a big fancy. I think this is also why we're not getting a lot of publicity. If I look through, I don't know, wedding guides, I mean, in South Africa, they have these huge wedding expos every year. You know, we can go there and all the bridal competitions and all just the photography things and everything. I never ever see anything. Maybe I'm just not looking because I'm not in that market. At the secular, I just don't see it promoted. And people also need to have an understanding that it's not a satanic ritual to do with the devil. Just because you're not getting married in the eyes of God and the church, it doesn't mean that even religious people can actually, you know, do these ceremonies. So I suppose for us as writers, we need to write more about it as well, Kato, and get the word out there. And I think it's great that we've done this show today, because I'm really racking my brain now. I don't know, apart from just like a few things I've seen recently, I could not tell you who the people are that are doing it in all these places. But then I know, because I know that Mubarak, before he was arrested, and he's been in prison for 3 years now, he did a lot of training, because a lot of the people that support him were trained by him. In Nigeria, you're all over. Exactly. So there you go. I'm clueless. So if I don't even know, and I'm in this godless African, you know, the same circles, what is your everyday man even going to know about it? So we need to start finding ways to raise awareness, I guess.
Thank you so much, Linda, for co-hosting this show. Please, thanks for the information. We'd like to tell our viewers, yes, you can have secular ceremonies in Africa. You can have them in Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Malawi, Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, and other countries. You simply need to ask where, and we shall be able to give you contacts of people who can help you have secular funerals, secular baby namings, secular weddings, and all that. Ceremonies without God. We shall be having a celebrant joining us in our next episode on the marriages. We shall be able to announce a date. We shall be able to inform you who joins us: Cyrus, Kabeko Brian, and others from Ghana, from Nigeria. We shall be having them on set to share with you where they can help you achieve your dreams. You have ceremonies without gods. Thank you, Todd Mayer. Thank you, Dean Kruger, and everyone who was watching. We are saying stay better, stay powerful, stay strong, and keep your hope alive. Until the next show, we are saying bye. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Oh, we've got a very special show next week, because Kato and I have been... Oh, guys.
Bye-bye.